Caleb Calhoun want to get in this Brandon Miller situation. We had a post on the YouTube channel that said Tennessee needs a coach like Nate Oats, and they need a natural scorer like Brandon Miller to help them get through the hard times. Now, this is before we discovered that Brandon Miller returned the gun that resulted in a shooting that resulted in the death of a young lady. I am astounded that you have two players that are directly or indirectly, one is charged with capital murder, and your basketball season is still ongoing. If this was Northwest Missouri State and they were 5-20, Caleb, you would shut the basketball program down and get some sort of answer to all this. Brandon Miller may have just borrowed a gun. He may have just given the gun back. It may be as simple as that. But I will say this. In the first place, Caleb, if you asked me to borrow a gun, I would say, sure, what's up? Okay. But I would ask, what's up? And if I said, Caleb, I need you to bring my gun back like now, you would say, yeah, what's up? I mean, that's just natural. You look out for one another. So one of us wouldn't, in some sort of fit of rage, get themselves in trouble, like the young man who's facing capital murder charges. But I am just astounded by the gall of Alabama that they would continue on with this basketball season. Are their guns being shuffled around left and right? This is something, in my opinion, that should have been shut down. Find the answer. It doesn't matter if it cost them a national championship or Final Four. To me, the whole thing is just so outside of the realm of possibility. There are times where I say to myself, no, that's just sports and they place winning over everything else. Caleb, this ain't that, man. This is way beyond. Like, this isn't even close. They should not be playing basketball right now.
Oh, look, I'm going to give my thoughts.
If you disagree, tell me.
Yeah, I disagree with you on that. Now, on the principle, let me say this. If you want to say because the way Nate Oats handled it, which was to sweep this under the rug that Brandon Miller was involved and then wait until it came out and then for them to call a press conference and defend him. Look, there was a legitimate narrative that could make Brandon Miller seem innocent. According to his attorney, now take it what you want, but according to his attorney, the gun was left in his car. He didn't borrow it. It was left in his car, and then he was returning it. And I think because he was not charged, and that's his attorney's statement, and we don't know what the other side is saying right now, I understand not suspending him. I disagree with I think if you say shut down the season, though, you open up just an example. Do you remember? And A.J. Johnson turned out to be innocent of this, but remember the charges that got A.J. Johnson suspended in 2014? I don't think Tennessee football should have shut down the season over that.
Well, no, but somebody's dead now.
Yeah, but I mean, like, what about this? The 2011 Penn State scandal when it broke in midseason. Do you think they should have shut down the season that year?
Yes.
You think they should have just straight up shut down the season?
Yes, and I think that would undoubtedly happen at some small Division II school.
I mean, okay, I draw parallels with this now the one I'm going to name is even more scandalous because it involved somebody else on the team being murdered, but the Baylor basketball scandal in 2003. Remember that? Where a teammate got in trouble. Basically, a player was murdered, and he was, I think, shot by his own teammate. And they finished out that year. They did finish out that year. So I would say that, look, we're talking about a state. I mean, it's hard for me to sit there and say because Brandon Miller had a gun in his car. However you feel politically about anything, Alabama's very, very, very lax on gun laws, which is fine. That's what they want. They are very, lax on if you have a gun and you don't commit a crime with it, then you have a right. And Brandon Miller, we know, as far as we know right now, didn't commit the crime with it. I think the scandal was that the pat down, that was tone deaf. They were doing for the starting lineups. They'd apparently been doing that all year before all this broke out, and they just didn't think, hey, maybe we shouldn't do this anymore. I think the worst is the athletic department keeping quiet who was involved, because I know just there's based on what some people have told me, everybody down in Alabama knew there were other players involved beyond Darius Miles. They just didn't know who, and so they couldn't report it, if that makes sense.
I want to reconcile two things you said, and to make sure that we're on the same page. So, one, you kind of accused Nate Oats of covering it up, and then you just said the administration. I don't think Nate Oats covered it up. I think the entire administration covered up that Brandon Miller was
I agree.
involved, and so I think Nate Oats is fine. But I think that what happened is they were hoping, you get continuances and you get trials moved. And they were hoping all this would come out after the NCAA tournament, but instead it came out next week. If they knew that players, I don't have a problem with any 18-year-old having a gun. I'm not going to get into gun rights here, but the laws are the laws. I don't have a problem with that, but it flippantly being left in a car, loaning it out, just the whole situation is like, whoa, let's pump the brakes now and make sure that something crazy doesn't happen again. Because Caleb, I'm sure they're going to be on their P's and Q's after they saw what has happened. But I mean, if the whole mindset, I mean, a gun, whether or not you believe you should be able to own one, or you should be able to own an AR-15, or wherever your gun rights stand, it is still a responsibility like a car. Okay, I don't go out and drive my car 120 miles an hour to the gym just because. I don't loan my car out to some drunken guy at a bar and say, go drive it around. So there is some responsibility, and Brandon Miller and the particular player charged, they're responsible to some extent for this. And to me, I would say the same thing if it were Tennessee. I would shut down the season. I didn't think Tyler Smith from the get, because the registration was scratched off, I didn't think he should be able to play the rest of the season. I thought his college days should probably be over. So I'm not being duplicitous because of the team. I believe this is something you take very seriously. And I'm not anti-gun. I just want everybody to know that. But I am anti-careless with a gun.
Well, to what we know to a degree, because Darius Miles has been, obviously, he's not playing anymore. And he's got way bigger problems on whether or not he's playing again with Alabama again.
The jump shot is not his issue right now.
Exactly. As far as, because like the Tyler Smith thing, yeah, he had to be suspended, but Tyler Smith, to what we know, did break a law. Like Tyler Smith had an unregistered weapon. Was it unregistered? Yeah, he like you said, he covered the registration on it. He didn't.
It was scratched out. Yeah.
Yeah. So, which is like driving on without tags. So yeah, he wasn't legally within his rights to own that gun. As far as we know, we don't know yet that Brandon Miller even came close to breaking any law, or we don't even know he was careless yet, because we do know, like, again, his side is saying that the loaded gun was left in his car by Darius Miles, and he had no idea Darius Miles was leaving in his car, and that so he was just returning it to him. It wasn't like he borrowed the gun from Darius Miles, if that makes sense. That's what his side is saying. I don't know if it's true. I do know that I haven't heard any contradictory reports yet. Now, you can say that's because Tuscaloosa police were investigating this, and maybe they didn't want to look too far into Brandon Miller's involvement. So maybe I do think there's a responsibility of the Tuscaloosa police and people involved to come out. Let's not let them off the hook now. Somebody needs to come out from among public officials to say what exactly is the consensus of what they believe Brandon Miller's role was in. Because we're hearing from Brandon Miller's attorney, we're hearing from Nate Oats about wrong place, wrong time. We know about Darius Miles, and we know what the Tuscaloosa police testified, but we don't know the degree to what they believe Miller's involvement is, whether or not they chose to charge him. I'm very big on. I've been on this for years. It's hard for me to hold schools fully accountable sometimes when the legal system doesn't do its job. I thought, people got mad about Ray Rice not being suspended long enough when that first happened in 2014. I'm like, your anger should be at the state of New Jersey for not giving him a harsher punishment for what he did, not the NFL.
Oh, well, yeah, I get that. But at the college level, there's the conversation that happens after any transgression. and it's your opportunity to stay in good standing with the program, assuming the charges aren't heinous, okay? And it's when the coach sits down and says, "Tell me exactly what happened." Okay. And if you lie, you're going to lose the backing of the coach and the backing of the program. So my assumption is that conversation happened. And my assumption is Brandon Miller was honest about, hey, I gave him the gun back. And then to this point, there's no reason to question his integrity. But if I'm Nate Oats, I'm like, whoa now. We've got an issue of guns being passed around. And that to me is a major issue, especially in this day and age. Um, yeah, did Brandon Miller? Did anybody? Did Brandon Miller? I guess he didn't have time, but was he planning on going to the coach and saying he suddenly needed the gun one night late at night? I just there are all kinds of ways that this could have gone wrong, and it did. You've got an 18, 19-year-old, and you may think this is a reach, but I'm going to tie this into NIL money. I mean, a nice gun, a nice Beretta, $600, $700, $800. Probably don't have the cash for that as a college kid 20 years ago, right?
Right.
So now it's a status symbol. You go get it, like a really nice tattoo that could cost $600, $700, $800 or more. And that's being a kid. That's being an 18-year-old kid who's not spending their money very wisely. And a lot of kids at that age do that. I'm just really stunned that the response hasn't been even stronger. And the patting themselves down. I mean, good gracious, you don't have to be a PR major to say, hey, let's stop the patting down during the intros. And that happened last week and over the weekend. It just, to me, so they do this thing where he's introed and he holds his hands out and he's patted down, which I'm very comfortable with because I get patted down every time I go through TSA. And so I got patted down repeatedly over the weekend when I traveled up north. That's very uncomfortable. Caleb, are you familiar with that?
TSA pat downs?
Yes.
Yes, I fly a good bit. So yes, that is.
Do you get patted down often?
No, I've just had a couple times ever.
It's pretty much every time for me. And it's always, I'm going to use the back of my hand, sir, to pat your, you know what. And the last time he didn't use the back of the hand and didn't give me a warning.
Oh, gosh.
It was just a full-on goosing.
Good Lord.
There's nothing good about that.
I'll
but
say this.
We exchange numbers and maybe something will come of it.
Oh, God. Oh, Lord. I'll say
didn't
this
even
much.
buy me dinner.
What?
I can keep going.
Just to comment on this, to wrap this up somewhat, I will say that I still have much more vitriol for how Alabama handled the football player hitting the UT fan back in when the fan stormed the field back in October last year. They were acting like his life was threatened by the storming incident. And we all saw the video and it wasn't threatened. And for Nick Saban just to be like, do you guys know what he was going through? Really, Nick? Really? You think your player's life was in jeopardy by some like 18-year-old drunk girl coming near him?
Well, Nick Saban's just full of it. And there are a lot of fans that are diehard Alabama fans that believe him, and there are ancillary fans that don't know who Mike Shula is. And so I think that Nick Saban being full of it, he talked about players are a higher risk for injury when you go up tempo. Then what did he do? He went up tempo. Everything he's done, he didn't like the NIL, and then he said A&M should have to release how much they spent on NIL. Well, they didn't. And Alabama was asked the same thing. And because it's a private business transaction, it's not a Freedom of Information Act, they didn't release theirs either. So Nick Saban's full of it. He says what he wants to go ahead and push his agenda. And that agenda is Alabama being the best football program they can. So do I think that permeates throughout the athletic department? Absolutely. I think that Alabama at their administration level said, Nate Oats, we can take care of this. Let's handle this together. Nothing's going to come out until the NCAA tournament. We've seen Nick Saban manipulate this thing. This is easy. This is nothing. They don't realize that Nick Saban's a once in a generation type of coach. And I believe at his core is probably a good person. But does he fib about tempo? Does he fib about NIL? Yeah. He's got an agenda, Caleb.
Or the feeling that conference champions should, back in the BCS days, should be the ones to play for the national title, and then voting himself at number 2 after they lose to LSU.
Thank you. There's probably as soon as we're done, there's probably 3 other examples we'll think of.